At the edge of the map, beyond the familiar lines of North America, there's a land that feels closer to myth than geography. Alaska, a territory of staggering proportions, larger than Texas, California, and Montana combined, yet home to barely 700,000 people. For much of history, this corner of the world was isolated from the rest. Not empty, but untouched by outside empires. Indigenous peoples had lived here for thousands of years, navigating frozen seas and tundra that stretches to the Arctic Ocean. The first outsiders to reach these shores came from the west. Russian explorers and traders crossing the Bering Strait after conquering Siberia. In the mid-17th century, Vitus Bering, sailing under the Russian flag, charted this vast, unknown coastline. What followed was a fur trade empire that stretched from Kamchatka to Kodiak. Settlements emerged on remote coasts. Among them on the forested edge of Baranof Island, between snow-covered peaks and a restless sea, Sitka once ruled Russian America. It was a strategic foothold in the North Pacific, a place to harvest sea otter pelts. The soft gold that fueled empire's colonial ambitions. The locals, who had lived along these coasts for thousands of years, resisted the occupation fiercely. Tensions exploded in 1802 when Tlingit warriors attacked and destroyed the outpost. The Russians returned 2 years later, retaking the settlement and establishing New Archangel, the new capital of Russia's American territories. Yet by the 1860s, Russia's hold on Alaska was weakening. The fur trade had declined. The empire's finances were strained. In 1867, the territory was sold to the United States for $7.2 million in what would later be called Seward's Folly. The official transfer took place right here, on Sitka's Castle Hill. Russian troops lowered their flag, the stars and stripes rose in its place. Surrounding it all is the Tongass National Forest, the largest temperate rainforest on Earth. Sitka sits at its edge. From here, the green ocean stretches 16 million acres. A world unto itself, covering almost the entire southeast panhandle of Alaska. Here, evergreen trees like Sitka, spruce, and red cedar grow to immense sizes, some standing for more than 800 years. Rain falls on the Tongass almost year-round. Over 150 inches annually in some areas, feeding a dense web of rivers. Beneath the canopy, fallen trunks become nurseries for new growth. And lichens and ferns thrive in the constant humidity. The Tongass also functions as a massive carbon sink, one of the most effective in the Northern Hemisphere. Its old-growth trees store an estimated 44% of all carbon held by US national forests, making it a key player in regulating the planet's climate. Scientists call it one of the lungs of North America. A living system that filters carbon dioxide and produces oxygen on a continental scale. In the Tongass, the trees are ancient, but it's the bears that rule. This forest belongs to them. Both black bears and coastal brown bears live here, often within miles of each other. Admiralty Island alone is estimated to have about 1,600 brown bears, the highest concentration in North America. Each summer, millions of Pacific salmon return to spawn in the Tongass's rivers. For a few months, bears gather along riverbanks, wading into the cold water to snatch salmon from the current. A single adult can consume more than 80 pounds of fish per day during peak season, storing fat for the long winter ahead. When they drag salmon into the forest to eat, the leftover carcasses decompose and release nutrients into the soil. These nutrients are absorbed by the roots of the trees. In this way, bears literally fertilize the forest, linking ocean and land in one continuous loop. If the bears are the kings of the forest floor, the bald eagles rule the sky. No other place on Earth has more of them than Southeast Alaska. Along every river, on every driftwood log or spruce branch, you'll find them. It's easy to forget that this bird, now an American icon, was once on the brink. In the mid-20th century, pesticides and habitat loss brought their numbers to collapse across most of the continental United States. But Alaska remained a refuge, untouched, remote, and filled with food. Here the eagles never left. A full-grown bald eagle can reach a wingspan of over 7 feet, yet weighs barely 10 pounds. Hollow bones and dense muscle give it the balance of grace and strength. It can spot a fish from hundreds of feet above and drop like a stone. Most eagles in the Tongass build their nests high in the old-growth Sitka spruce. Massive platforms that can be 6 feet across. Mated pairs often stay together for life, circling above the forest together. East of Sitka, the Endicott Arm cuts deep into the mountains. A narrow fjord of blue water and sheer granite walls. At its end lies Dawes Glacier, a massive river of ice 12 miles long, flowing down from the Stikine ice field. The glacier's face towers hundreds of feet above the water. Streaked with bands of blue and grey, each one marking a century of compacted snowfall. When Dawes Glacier calves, the silence breaks. A chunk of ice the size of a building fractures and falls into the sea. It's not a rare event. The glacier moves continuously. The icebergs it creates drift slowly toward the sea, carrying shades of blue so vivid they seem lit from within. The calm waters shelter harbour seals, which raise their pups on floating ice, far from predators. For the mothers, the icebergs offer both a nursery and a fortress. Safe platforms where they can nurse their young and rest undisturbed. Tucked between the ocean and the dense green of the Tongass National Forest, Ketchikan was the first major port for ships heading north. The gateway to Alaska. It sits on Kodiak Island, a place where the rain almost never stops, and the sea feels close enough to touch from every window. Ketchikan began as a salmon cannery town in the late 1800s, earning the nickname Salmon Capital of the World. At the peak, dozens of plants line the waterfront, filling the air with the smell of brine and fish oil. The town climbs the hillside in a tangle of wooden stairways and boardwalks. Rain-slick streets wind between colourful houses built on stilts. Creek Street, once the city's red light district during the Prohibition era, is now one of Ketchikan's most photographed spots. Rain is part of the character. It falls here more than 230 days a year. Drenching the forest in shades of deep green. In the late 19th century, as the salmon industry grew in the south, a new kind of fever began to spread through Alaska: the search for gold. And it was this pursuit that led to the founding of Juneau, the capital that would rise between the mountains and the sea. In 1880, prospectors Joe Juneau and Richard Harris found traces of gold in a stream that would later be called Gold Creek. Within months, a camp took shape at the foot of Mount Juneau. Tents, shanties, and dreams stacked along the shoreline. The Treadwell mine across the channel on Douglas Island soon followed. At its height, it was one of the largest gold mines in the world. The boom ended, but the city stayed, proof that Juneau's foundation was more than just luck. Today, it's hard to picture that frenzy when you arrive by plane or boat. The only ways in or out. Juneau is a capital without roads to the outside world. Enclosed by the Coast Mountains on one side and the Gastineau Channel on the other. Above the city, the mountains disappear beneath an unbroken sea of white. This is the Juneau ice field, one of the largest in North America. Spanning more than 1,500 square miles, it stretches all the way to the border of British Columbia. Over time, gravity pulled the ice field downhill through every valley and canyon, carving a network of glaciers. Scientists have studied this landscape since the 1940s. Their work has revealed how this frozen world responds to a changing climate. Most glaciers here are retreating. But there is one exception. The Taku Glacier. Located about 25 miles southeast of Juneau, it's the largest glacier flowing from the ice field, more than 36 miles long and nearly 5 miles wide. Unlike most of its neighbours, Taku had been advancing for much of the 20th century, pressing forward into the fjord. Yet around 2018, scientists observed that the edge had stopped moving forward. A turning point marking the start of a new chapter in the glacier's long story, a slow retreat. North of Juneau, the road ends at a lake, grey and still, and at its far shore rises the Mendenhall Glacier. Like Taku, this ice river is one of more than 36 that flow from a sprawling plateau of snow that stretches across the Coast Mountains. It's a place where winter never really ends. Snow piles on snow, year after year, until gravity takes over and the mass begins to move. Mendenhall has been flowing down this valley for nearly 3,000 years, carving rock and shaping rivers. At the glacier's base, the meltwater becomes a lake, and from the cliffs beside it roars Nugget Falls. a white torrent that seems to tumble straight out of the clouds. The waterfall hits the lake with a force you can feel in your chest, its spray mingling with the glacier's cold breath. The Mendenhall, like most glaciers in Alaska, is shrinking faster than ever before. Not long ago, the ice filled this entire valley. Visitors in the 1930s could touch it from the road. Today, the glacier has retreated more than a mile. What we see today is a glimpse of a world that's melting into memory. At the northern end of Alaska's Inside Passage, the mountains close in until there's only room for a single strip of land. In the late 1890s, Skagway became the gateway to fortune. When gold was discovered in the Klondike, more than 100,000 stampeders set their sights on the Yukon. The town exploded overnight. From a handful of cabins to a roaring frontier of saloons, gambling halls and tent camps. Two routes led out of Skagway, the White Pass and the Chilkoot Trail. Both were brutal, steep, cold and deadly. Men hauled supplies on their backs, sometimes making dozens of trips just to move a ton of gear. But in 1898, a group of investors saw another way. Not on foot, but by rail. Within a year, thousands of labourers from across the world began blasting and cutting through the granite spine of the Coast Mountains. And when the White Pass and Yukon Route Railway opened in 1900, it was hailed as an engineering miracle. The railway built of gold. Its little steam engines clawed their way up the cliffs, curling along wooden trestles and through tunnels hand-carved from the rock. A century later, the railway still runs. Not for miners, but for travellers who come to trace the route of history. From the glaciers of southeast Alaska, history drifts north across the Gulf to a coastline where the trees vanish and tundra takes over. Here, at the edge of the Bering Sea, lies Nome. Like Skagway, this settlement rose from nothing when gold was found not in the mountains but right on the beach. The news spread faster than the Arctic wind. Within a year, nearly 20,000 people had flooded this isolated shore. Nome's gold wasn't buried deep. It shimmered right there, in the sands. People shoveled the shore itself, building makeshift camps along the coast. Today, you can still find the wooden dredges that clawed through riverbeds a century ago, left to rust in the tundra. And the old Nome Council Road follows the path of early miners, leading past rivers that still hide traces of gold. Nome feels like the end of America, and maybe it is. From its shore, you can almost imagine the curve of the Earth leading to Asia. Founded in 1915 as a tent city for the workers building the Alaska Railroad, Anchorage began as a muddy camp at the mouth of Ship Creek. But it had one advantage that would define its future: location. Protected by Cook Inlet, with the Chugach Mountains rising just behind, Anchorage became the natural hub for a territory too vast for roads. From here, everything moved north: supplies, people, ambition. By the time Alaska became a state in 1959, Anchorage was its beating heart. Though one that learned quickly how fragile it all was. On Good Friday, 1964, the city was shaken by the most powerful earthquake ever recorded in North America. Magnitude 9.2. Entire neighborhoods crumbled. But Anchorage rebuilt, stronger and faster than anyone expected. Today, it's home to nearly 40% of Alaska's population. Yet from almost any street, you can see snow-capped peaks. It's a city where the wild is never more than a few steps away. South Central Alaska opens up as we leave the city. The landscape begins to change. The wilderness gives way to broad stretches of farmland. At the heart of it lies Palmer, with its orderly streets and fields that thrive in soil carried down from ancient ice. Palmer's story begins in the 1930s during the Great Depression with the Matanuska Colony Project. Hundreds of families from the Midwest were relocated here to create an agricultural foothold in a state better known for mountains and snow than for farms. Many settlers had never seen snow-capped peaks or winters so long, yet they persevered, establishing the valley as Alaska's breadbasket. The lifeblood of the valley is the Matanuska River. Fed by glaciers high in the mountains, its waters carry mineral-rich silt, making Palmer one of the few places in Alaska suitable for large-scale agriculture. In the summer, fields of barley, cabbage and potatoes stretch for miles, framed by towering peaks. Around Palmer, in the shadow of the Talkeetna Mountains, Hatcher Pass reaches the elevation of about 3,800 feet. Reflecting Alaska's geologic richness and its frontier past. Patches of snow linger well into summer, and small alpine glaciers cling to the mountain flanks. A snapshot of how nature transitions from lowland to high alpine in just a few miles. But the pass owes its fame to the lure of gold. The Independence Mine, perched along the slopes, became one of the most productive in Alaska. Prospectors first discovered precious metal here in 1906. And by the 1930s, the Alaska Pacific Consolidated Mining Company had taken over operations. The mine extracted tens of thousands of ounces of gold, contributing to the wave of optimism that Alaska's mineral wealth seemed to promise in the early 20th century. But World War II and a drop in gold prices made operations unprofitable. The mine shut down. Today, its weathered buildings and structures are slowly being reclaimed by the tundra. From Anchorage, the Seward Highway follows the silver curves of Turnagain Arm. A long fjord with some of the largest tidal ranges in the world, up to 40 feet. Then, just beyond Portage Glacier, the road vanishes into the Anton Anderson Memorial Tunnel. A narrow passage blasted straight through the mountain. At 2.5 miles, it's the longest highway tunnel in North America. On the other side, Whittier sits at the head of Passage Canal. A deep, fjord-like inlet opening into Prince William Sound. Mountains on 3 sides, ocean on the 4th, and clouds that seem to settle permanently above it. With over 250 inches of rain and snow each year, Whittier ranks among the wettest inhabited places on Earth. The US Army founded it as a supply base and built 2 massive concrete buildings. The Buckner Building and the Begik Towers. When the military pulled out in the 1960s, most residents moved into the Begik Tower. Where nearly all of Whittier's 250 residents still live today. Inside are apartments, a school, a grocery, the city offices, and even a church. A vertical community in a single building. Outside the tower, Whittier's harbour hums with a mix of fishing boats, ferries and tour vessels. It's one of the key access points to Prince William Sound. a patchwork of deep blue water and white ice, framed by the coastal mountains that rise abruptly from the sea. The Sound covers roughly 15,000 square miles. And with more than 3,800 miles of shoreline, from above it looks like a shattered mirror. About 150 glaciers descend the mountain slopes. Among them, the Columbia Glacier is one of the fastest moving in the world. Since the 1980s, it began a rapid retreat, pulling back more than 12 miles and losing over half its thickness. The water here glows a pale, milky turquoise, coloured not by depth or reflection, but by suspended glacial silt. The fjords are filled with floating icebergs, each carrying the brilliant blues of ancient snow compacted over centuries. Most of the land surrounding Prince William Sound is part of the Chugach National Forest, the second largest in the US. Its mountains rise straight from the sea, climbing more than 10,000 feet in a matter of miles. Their flanks covered in spruce and hemlock. More than 30% of the territory is covered by ice. Including parts of massive glaciers that descend from the vast Prince William Sound ice field. The Chugach people, whose name the forest carries, lived along these coasts long before explorers arrived. Later came Russian traders, American miners, and the builders of the Alaska Railroad, carving narrow routes through rough terrain. In the early 20th century, Chugach was set aside as a national forest. Not for recreation, but to manage timber and minerals. Today, it's a mosaic of uses: wilderness zones, recreation areas, and protected habitats interwoven with small communities. At the far eastern edge of Prince William Sound, surrounded by steep, glacier-clad peaks, lies Valdez, a small town with a dramatic history. Founded in 1898 during the Klondike Gold Rush, Valdez was born of desperation and deception. Promoters in Seattle advertised it as the all-American route to the Yukon, claiming an easy passage over the nearby Valdez Glacier. Thousands arrived by ship, only to find themselves trapped in an ice-choked bay with no viable trail ahead. Many perished trying to cross the glacier. Others stayed, building a settlement at the head of the sound that refused to disappear. Its location, though remote, was strategic. Deep waters made it one of the few year-round ice-free ports in Alaska. When the Trans-Alaska Pipeline was completed in 1977, Valdez became its southern terminus. The point where crude oil from Prudhoe Bay met the sea. Enormous tankers began to dock here, carrying Alaska's black gold to refineries around the world. In 1793, Alexander Baranov, the governor of Russian America, founded Port Voskresensky. Modern-day Seward on the south edge of what he called Chugach Bay. Here, under the shadow of the Kenai Mountains, Russian settlers built the Phoenix, the first vessel ever constructed by Russians in the Americas. After the Alaska Purchase of 1867, Seward evolved slowly from a seasonal trading post into a strategic harbour. By the early 1900s, it became the southern terminus of the Alaska Railroad, linking the port to Anchorage and the resource-rich interior. This connection turned Seward into a crucial artery for goods, ore and fish. And later, for tourists drawn to the untamed scenery. Each summer, the streets fill with visitors chasing the same feeling that drew Baranov here. That blend of promise and peril that defines Alaska's coast. Yet beyond its beauty, Seward has always been a working town, a place defined by its people as much as its setting. The harbour bustles with fishing boats, cruise ships, and research vessels heading into the open sea. Just beyond Seward, the road ends and the wilderness begins. Kenai Fjords National Park, a landscape shaped by the constant tug-of-war between ice and ocean. Established in 1980, it protects nearly 670,000 acres of rugged coastline and ice fields. Dozens of tidewater glaciers spill from the massive Harding ice field, a frozen ocean of snow and compressed time. Each one tells a different story. The Ayalik, the Holgate, the Bear, and others all flow from the same frozen heart directly into the water. While on land, the Exit Glacier, one of the park's most accessible, offers a glimpse of glacial retreat that can be walked step by step through time. Signs along the trail mark where the ice stood decades ago. 1951, 1978, 2005, showing how quickly this frozen world is changing. The glacier continues to shrink, its lower tongue melting back year after year as temperatures rise. Scientists studying the Harding ice field warn that if current trends continue, much of its lowland ice could vanish within a century. South along the Stirling Highway, the road follows the spine of the Kenai Peninsula, winding through forests until it meets the sea again. And where pavement runs out and the ocean begins, lies Homer, a town locals like to call simply the end of the road. The settlement occupies the shore of Katmai Bay. Across from a skyline of glaciers and snow-draped peaks. Out from the centre stretches the Homer Spit, a narrow 4.5-mile finger of gravel jutting into the bay lined with weathered fishing shacks. The city's story begins with coal. In the 1890s, prospectors discovered veins of it in the cliffs nearby. And a man named Homer Pennock arrived with dreams of mining fortune. The town bears his name, though his operation was short-lived, like many early Alaskan ventures that began in optimism and ended in mud. By the mid-20th century, fishing had taken over, and Homer grew into a working harbour known for its halibut. These flat giants of the sea can weigh several hundred pounds. And today, it proudly calls itself the halibut fishing capital of the world. North of Anchorage, the road leaves the coast and climbs into the heart of Alaska. Here lies Denali National Park, Alaska's crown jewel of untamed nature, where wilderness stretches as far as the eye can see. Established in 1917, it was created not to entertain, but to protect. To keep a sanctuary for the creatures and ice fields of the Alaska Range. At the heart of the park stands Denali, North America's highest peak at 20,310 feet. Its massive summit dominates the skyline. The mountain shapes the ecosystem, snowlines shift with the seasons, rivers rise and fall, and wildlife moves in response to the ever-changing terrain. Denali's scale is matched by its wildlife. Among the park's icons are the moose, North America's largest deer species. Their sheer size, males can weigh over 1,500 pounds, makes them formidable yet graceful inhabitants of the park. High on the rocky slopes, Dall sheep cling to cliffs and ridges. Their creamy white coats striking against the grey granite. These agile mountain dwellers navigate precipitous terrain with uncanny balance, feeding on sparse alpine grasses and lichen. In the center of Alaska, far from the coasts and mountains, we meet Fairbanks, a city built on permafrost. It began in 1901, when a trader navigating the Chaina River ran aground near what was then wilderness. Days later, prospectors discovered gold nearby, and within months, tents and log cabins filled the riverbanks. Fairbanks became the heart of Alaska's interior gold rush. A supply hub for miners pushing into the Tanana Valley. For much of the 20th century, Fairbanks grew as a centre for commerce, research and education. It remains home to the University of Alaska, where scientists study Arctic ecosystems that define life at these latitudes. Winters here are long and cold, with temperatures often dropping below minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. The sun barely rises for a few hours. When the sky clears, the aurora borealis transforms the darkness. Fairbanks lies beneath one of the best viewing belts on Earth. The magnetic field channels solar particles into glowing ribbons of green, purple, and red. North of Fairbanks, the road thins, the trees begin to scatter, and civilization fades in the rearview mirror. The Dalton Highway begins here, a 414-mile stretch of gravel and ice that cuts through the wilderness toward the Arctic Ocean. Built in the 1970s to support construction of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, it remains a lifeline for the workers who keep that steel artery flowing. The Dalton isn't a highway in the ordinary sense. Truckers call it the Haul Road, and they drive it year-round through snow, sleet and fog. The Yukon River Bridge marks the first major crossing. And the only one over this great river in Alaska. Beyond the Yukon, the highway climbs to Atagun Pass. A narrow gateway between the forested interior and the Arctic tundra beyond. Here, trees vanish and the landscape flattens into the North Slope. A cold, wind-beaten plain that seems to stretch forever. The permafrost lies just beneath the surface, and for most of the year, the ground is locked in ice. At the end of the Dalton Highway, the road stops, not with a sign or a milestone, but with the sea. Beyond the oil fields of Prudhoe Bay, the Arctic Ocean stretches toward the pole. And further west, along that same frozen coast, lies Utqiagvik. Once known as Barrow, the northernmost community in the United States. There are no highways to reach it. From Deadhorse, only air connects this place to the rest of Alaska. Life here exists at the edge of what's possible. Average winter temperatures hover around minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and storms sweep in from the Arctic. The ground is permafrost, so every building is raised on stilts to prevent heat from melting the frozen soil beneath. Despite the isolation, Utqiagvik isn't the end of the world, though it can feel that way. It's the top, a place where the land narrows into sea and the compass points to nothing but cold. Meanwhile, on the southern coast, an estimated 2,200 bears roam Katmai National Park. Thriving on one of the richest seasonal feasts in nature, the salmon run. Every summer, as sockeye salmon push upstream from Bristol Bay to spawn, the rivers explode with movement. The most famous spot of all is Brooks Falls, where dozens of brown bears converge to fish in the same cascade, each using its own strategy. Some stand midstream, others wait below the falls to scoop up the unlucky few that slip through. The scene has become one of the most iconic wildlife spectacles in the world, broadcast live each summer. But in person, it feels more primal than picturesque. The bears, enormous and unhurried, move with a kind of ancient confidence. They feed until they're fat enough to survive the long winter hibernation. When they'll retreat to dens carved into the volcanic hills. Cubs, born during that deep sleep, emerge in spring. Tiny, unsteady, and immediately dependent on their mother's strength and knowledge. From the volcanic valleys of Katmai, the map bends eastward across the sea, toward a rugged island. Kodiak, Alaska's Emerald Isle, lies just beyond the mainland. Wrapped in fog, spruce, and the sound of crashing surf. In 1784, this island became the site of Alaska's first permanent Russian settlement. Established by Grigory Shelikov. After the 1867 Alaska Purchase, Kodiak slowly transitioned into an American fishing outpost. Its harbours filling with canneries and boats instead of fur traders' ships. But beyond the docks lies a wilderness that feels unchanged. And here lives the island's most famous resident, the Kodiak brown bear. These bears are close relatives of the ones in Katmai and the Tongass, but isolation has made them giants. Males can reach 1,500 pounds, standing over 10 feet tall when upright. Yet despite their size, they move with an ease that seems impossible for such mass. Their lives follow the same seasonal cycle as their mainland cousins. Feeding on salmon in summer, berries in fall, and hibernating through winters. Beyond Kodiak, Alaska stretches itself thin. The land fragmenting into the Aleutian Islands. A vast chain of over 300 volcanic isles that arc toward Asia. At the heart of this chain lies Unalaska, the green and rugged soul of the Aleutians. The island is carved by ancient forces, a landscape of steep ridges and tumbling waterfalls. Grasses sweep over treeless hills, their colour shifting from emerald to bronze with the seasons. Countless streams spill from the mountains, cascading through mossy valleys before vanishing into the sea. The coastline folds endlessly into coves, inlets, and bays. With names that carry both Russian and Unangan roots. Human presence here feels small, almost temporary. The town of Dutch Harbour occupies just a corner of the island, dwarfed by mountains and weather. Despite small size, it's one of the busiest fishing ports in the United States. Known worldwide from the television series Deadliest Catch. The harbour's fleets haul millions of pounds of pollock and crab from the Bering Sea each year. The same waters that have sustained people here for millennia. In the end, Alaska is a reminder that the planet still has corners where the modern world fades into background noise. This is a land that resists control. It has been mapped, mined, and measured, yet never truly claimed. The Russians came for fur, the Americans for gold and oil, the dreamers for freedom. And still, the wilderness dictates the rules. It grows back over roads, swallows ghost towns, reclaims everything we leave behind. Out here, time doesn't erase, it absorbs. Even today, most of Alaska remains inaccessible. No roads, no power lines, no cell signal. Hundreds of communities can only be reached by plane or boat. The people who call it home live in balance with nature. They know the taste of cold air at 50 below and the brief ecstasy of endless daylight. Alaska reminds us of what we've forgotten, that the world is not ours to shape entirely. It is not a place you conquer, but one you learn to respect.